Welcome to Book Banter with me, your host, Dianne Burkhart. I hope you will join me every Wednesday as we explore all things to do with, well, books. Let's get on with our show today. Hello, my happy people. Today is November 1st, and I hope you had a wonderful and warm Halloween yesterday. Halloween is not really a big thing here in Germany. People like to go out and have parties, but decorating your houses and going out trick-or-treating is not really a thing here. And that is one of the things that I miss most about being in the United States. I really miss Halloween. I love it. But there are so many other things that are great about being here. They have Carnival, which is so much fun, which is kind of like months worth of Halloween, where people dress up in costumes and parades and parties and everything. So there's trade-offs. But enough about that. I have got a fantastic author for you today, and so I don't want to spend a lot of time talking right now, but be sure to stick around at the end because I have got some great news about Book Banter magazine and what is coming up with Burkhart Books. But for right now, let's just get to our interview. We have got the fantastic Debbie Weiss, and you are going to love what she has to say. If you are trying to make a change in your life, this is somebody you want to check out. Please welcome to Book Banter with Dianne Burkhart, Debbie Weiss.
Hi, Dianne. So thank you so much for having me. My name is Debbie Weiss, and I am an author of two different books. One, my memoir, which is called On Second Thought, Maybe I Can, as well as I'm a collaborative author in the book Heart Whispers. And the reason I wrote my memoir is because I want to inspire people with my story. And my story is really about overcoming your limiting beliefs, stopping to use your circumstances as an excuse to not live the life that you want to live, which is something that I did for the first 50 years of my life. And once I realized that I had the power to direct my life any way I wanted, regardless of the things that I couldn't change that were happening in my life, then my whole life shifted. And I want to share that message and teach others how to do the same.
Before you had this epiphany and made this great life change, what was your life like? What were you doing?
I have been a family caregiver to 3 different family members for over 45 years. I started when I was 17, and my dad had a massive stroke but survived. My parents were divorced. My dad lived for 30 years, and I was his person. I was his caregiver. He didn't live with me, but it was my responsibility to handle his money, handle his medical things, figure out where he was going to live on such a limited budget, a place where they could properly take care of him. You know, I was the one visiting him and bringing him food and all the things for 30 years. And then when I had my oldest son, he was diagnosed on the autistic spectrum when he was 2. And as parents, we're all caregivers, but when you have a child with special needs, it really ramps that caregiving up several notches.
Yeah.
And then my husband also later in his life was ill with many physical ailments as well as mental illness. And that was my life. I was taking care of everyone and everything. I have 2 sons. I also have a younger son. And I am an insurance agent and running a business full time. And trying to just, who do I help first? And me personally, Debbie was not on the radar at all. It was just jumping from one thing to another. And on top of all of that, I couldn't say no. So I was volunteering for many different organizations simultaneously.
That is exhausting just to listen to that. I mean, when did you ever have any time to just take a breath?
Really never. Now looking back, I also struggle with my weight since I was born, basically. And during that time, my weight struggles really intensified. I gained a lot of weight on top of my usual amount, just because that's what I would do at the end of the day, I would just crash to the couch, look at mindless TV, and just snack because I was exhausted. And then, get up the next day and do it all over again.
So what was it that led to the epiphany that made you make such a drastic life change?
Turning 50 really had a significant impact on me. A couple of things happened. One, 3 of my closest friends insisted that we go away and celebrate. And how was I ever going to do that? I had too many responsibilities. How was anybody going to be able to manage without me? And we're only talking about 3 days. And they insisted, and I'm so glad they did, because I had the most amazing time laughing and just reconnecting with who I was. It was really the first time in my adult life where people were asking what I wanted to do. And I wasn't used to that. Through that weekend, I realized that I had lost a lot of myself over the past 30 or so years. And the other thing that was significant is I started to really feel that sense of kind of like mortality motivation. Now I was 50. Hopefully I'll live to 100, but let's just say my life is at least half over. Am I going to be that person who's laying on their deathbed, looking back at the movie of their life and regretting the things that I never did? And I didn't have a list, by the way, of things I wanted to do. I had no idea what I wanted to do. But all I knew is if, God forbid, I had died that day, I would have had a lot of regrets. And it wouldn't have been the fact that I took care of everybody. Absolutely not. I would not change that. And I continue to do so today. But what I regretted was not living whatever that life is that I wanted. That didn't get equal time with what everybody else needed. And it was then that I said, okay, I got to try and take control and figure this out.
How did you end up balancing taking care of others and taking care of yourself?
Well, I started to set boundaries. First of all, I could never say no. So I realized the first thing that had to go was some of these volunteer opportunities. Because I want to help everybody. That's just who I am. I don't want to say no, but I realized I was saying yes at my expense. And the more that I put on my plate, the less effective I was at every single thing that I was trying to do.
Yeah.
And so I started with that volunteer stuff. And then I really started trying to set some boundaries at home with my family. It was a priority that I went to. Jazzercise was my exercise of choice. And it wasn't only good for my physical body, but it was incredibly beneficial for my mental health.
Oh, yeah.
And I was going, whatever it was, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Saturday morning, and everybody knew, don't even think about bothering me during those times because those times were slated in for me and me alone. And my family members started to really understand and accept it. No, I will be with you when I'm done, but not now. So it was a slow process, but, people had to get used to a new normal.
Did you get any pushback from family or friends whenever you started setting boundaries?
Well, I had some friends that were actually helping me to understand that this is what I needed to do. So I was very lucky in that sense. I did not get pushback from my friends. From my immediate family, there was certainly a little pushback initially, but I really was committed at that point. And what could they need me for in that hour and a half that I was taking to myself? They didn't. And they eventually did get on board.
You have your insurance company, but you're also a podcaster, an author, a life coach. You have an online store. You do daily inspirations. It sounds like you still have a lot on your plate.
Well, it's funny you should say that. Yes. Yes, I do. I don't know how I managed to do this, but you know what the difference is? The difference is that all those things that you mentioned, other than me being an insurance agent, have happened after I had this big mindset shift.
Mhm.
And the difference is all those things that you mentioned that I do now, I absolutely love.
Mhm.
And I'm doing it because it lights me up. It's not like I don't like my job as an insurance agent. It's fine. And I still do that today. And I'm very lucky that I have an amazing team. I've been an agent for almost 30 years. So I have an amazing team there that kind of doesn't need me anymore in the day to day operation. So it's really allowed me to step into this new person that I've become. And the difference is that, like I said, every day I get up so excited. Yes, I have a lot on my to-do list, and yes, it is exhausting, but I've created it. If I want to change it, I have the power to change it. But the difference is that each day there's a new experience, right? I get to meet and talk to wonderful new people on podcasts. I get to engage with people on social media and clients. And last night I was at a local Chamber of Commerce event and I got to connect with old friends as well as new people. And it just invigorates me and excites me.
How did you become a contributing author on Heart Whispers?
I actually have a friend who I've never met her in person. She's an online friend that I met a few years ago now, and she does mindfulness for children. Wonderful, wonderful woman. And she was offered a spot as a contributing author, and she recommended me. It actually happened while I was in the process of writing my book. So in the end, what wound up happening was one of the stories in my book was a nice match for the Heart Whispers. And that's how it happened. It's not told exactly the same way in both books. It's just one little story in my memoir, but that's how, they read it and they loved it and said, yes, we'd love to have you.
What is this with Sprinkle of Goodness?
So the Morning Sprinkle of Goodness is a free PDF download on my website through my transformation. I tried so many things that I was closed-minded about before or said that I couldn't do. And one of them was journaling. One of them was writing. We didn't talk about that. I never had a dream to be an author, which is unusual because it seems like so many people I talk to say, oh, I always wanted to write a book. I never wanted to write a book. Never. It just kind of happened. And of course, now that I've got the bug and I'm ready to start book number 2. But it was not my dream. And journaling seemed like to look at a blank piece of paper. It was so intimidating and nerve-wracking and anxiety producing because I think I had in my mind, I was an A student. And what if I didn't do it right? Even though I knew no one was reading it, no one was grading me. And when I started to get into the idea of journaling, I actually started with a physical journal where it gave me prompts to fill in. And that was less intimidating because I just had to answer the questions.
Yeah.
And then when I discovered how incredible it was to actually open up a notebook, that's what I use, and a blank piece of paper and just stream of consciousness, right? And it was so interesting to see what was on my mind when I first started writing. And by the end, how many twists and turns it took and how through that process, it really brought a lot of clarity. And when I realized how much I enjoyed that journaling, that kind of gave me the confidence to say, well, maybe I can write. But that didn't answer your question. So what I decided was I wanted to create a journal that was accessible to everyone. And I added some of those daily prompts that I found helpful, as well as just some blank pages for you to write whatever is on your mind. And so that's kind of where Morning Sprinkles of Goodness was born.
I happen to recommend journaling to a lot of people, especially if anybody is going through a very traumatic time, especially like with healthcare or loss of a job or loss of a relationship. I always give them a blank journal
Yep.
because I know when I went through all of my medical stuff, that was one of the things that kept me sane when I was going through it, was journaling my emotions during that time period.
Yeah, I just rejected the idea for such a long time. And the title of my book, which we'll talk about, is On Second Thought, Maybe I Can. And it's really about stopping. I was always saying, I can't, whatever new idea that I felt, I'm not good at writing, so I can't do this. And then when you stop saying you can't, it opens you up to things that are so beneficial that you would never have discovered.
So when did you start writing your book?
I started writing my book in September of 2022. I did it with a woman I had heard interviewed on a podcast who helped first-time authors get their story out there. She was starting a 12-week group program. And after listening to her on the podcast, I went online and connected with her. And I thought to myself, since I don't have any background in writing, if I'm ever going to do this, I need help. And I just knew that she was the person for me. I was very nervous being with first-time authors, those limiting beliefs of my writing isn't good enough. They're going to be better than me. They're going to judge me, which was all ridiculous. And at the same time that I had to make the decision to sign up for this course, my husband was actually diagnosed with terminal blood cancer.
Ugh.
And I went to my therapist and I said, I'm embarrassed to even ask you this question because I know it's ridiculous. And I tell her about the course and I say, how can I even consider doing something like this at a time like this in my life and my family's life? And she said, I absolutely think that you should do it. Mm-hmm. Because it will give you something else to focus on other than what's going on in the rest of your world. And if you don't write the book, if you don't show up every week with, the quote unquote homework, who cares?
Yeah.
And obviously she was right because it did give me something else to focus on. I was very committed and diligent in making sure that I set, if I could, an hour aside every day, whether it was before my husband woke up or when I knew he was okay and laying down. I would say I'm going upstairs for an hour, kind of that same boundary as I discussed earlier with the jazzercise. I'm going upstairs for an hour. I told him I'm on a meeting because I used to do a lot of co-writing, online. Mm-hmm. And I'm going upstairs for a meeting. And unless it's an emergency, don't bother me. Mm-hmm. And that's the only way it happened. And so he passed away December 30th, 2022. And I was 2 chapters shy of finishing.
Oh, wow. That is an incredible story. So how long did it take you after that to be able to finish it?
So I was supposed to have the first draft to the editor on January 14th, so 2 weeks later. And of course, they said to me, don't be silly, we'll push it back as far as you want it. And I said, no, you know what? I don't want to push it back because after everybody leaves, after the funeral's over, it's one of the hardest times. Mm-hmm. And I like the idea that kind of like it helped me through when he was dying. What was I going to do? It was nice to have this to focus on. and that deadline. And so I stuck with it and I got it to them by January 14th.
Wow. That's incredible. It's
I
also a great dedication to yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, when I was going through it, I didn't realize. And now looking back, especially because I am now trying to do the same thing and figure out, okay, I've got to be as diligent and schedule time in and stick to that schedule on my calendar
Mm-hmm.
to write book number 2 with all the things that you mentioned before that I'm doing. But I just think about being on the other side and how good it feels to have the book out there in the world. It was therapy. I mean, I have to say, it was therapy. When you write your memoir too, and you're writing these stories about past events that happened in your life, that's also therapeutic because you have to put yourself back in that mindset. Try and put yourself back in how you were feeling at the time when you write that story so that your reader is there with you, feeling what you were feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And that was cathartic. And it took me out of what was going on currently and put me into another time. Some good, some not so good.
That's definitely understandable. How
Yeah,
long after you published your book did you start creating your website and your public speaking? I mean, how did this all evolve?
that's an interesting question. So, my website actually started well before the book. My original, so let me backtrack for a minute. Once I went on this journey and I started realizing that everything that was happening or wasn't happening in my life was due to my mindset, that I had the power to think the thoughts that I wanted, and that just because I thought something didn't mean it was true.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a revelation to me. With that, I realized that one of the things in my life that I hadn't addressed, which was very stressful, was my money situation. And there's a whole backstory, and I have a chapter in it in the book, something I really didn't want to share, but in the end decided it was important to share. And so I attended a mastermind group online, which I had no idea what that was, because I decided that the way I was going to help my money situation was to make money by selling a supplement that I used that I loved. And so I joined this mastermind and I figured, okay, they're going to help me figure out how I'm supposed to do this. And I joined the mastermind and I was blown away by what I learned. I discovered this whole online world of different types of coaches and businesses that I had never really been exposed to. And I was so inspired because so many of them were taking their own life's experiences and sharing them with others how they got through something and got to the other side and then were there to help others. And I love that because that was such a passion and a purpose. And that's what I wanted. I mean, I like the supplements just like I like insurance, but it's not a passion. And so that was back in late 2020, early 21. And the first business that I launched was called the Caregiver Support Squad because being a caregiver for so many years, I had discovered the importance of self-care.
Mm-hmm.
And so the website was originally created as the Caregiver Support Squad. I wanted to coach other caregivers on how they learn to prioritize their self-care. And so I had done that for about a year and realized at the time it was too heavy for me to talk to others about their carry and their struggles. Empathetic. And so I was taking on everybody else's hardships,
Yeah.
and it was just too much for me. And I realized there's a broader message that I have. It's not just to caregivers because it's not only about self-care. It's learning that you have the power to transform your life regardless of your circumstances. And so that's when I pivoted maybe a year later. So the website just then at that point just kind of needed some rebranding.
And what is the focus of your podcast?
Well, it is called the Maybe I Can podcast. So couple of different things. I like to share tips and give people food for thought about how do you transform your life and what are the steps necessary. And then I like to have guests that have done just that in different ways and who share their story, and other guests who maybe share how they can help us learn to transform our lives.
And where do you usually do public speaking? Who hires you for engagements?
Since the book, that's something that I have been passionate about launching. I did do some public speaking with the Caregiver Support Squad. I actually went to school districts and spoke to what we in New Jersey call the Special Education Parent Advisory Council, or they have some different names, talking to parents of kids with special needs, because I can relate to that. I know what it feels like, especially when the children are younger, and really sharing my message at that point about taking care of yourself. Doing that speaking, touching people and seeing the emotion and the pain that they were in, and feeling like I made at least a little bit of difference in their lives. That feeling is incredible. And the best way to share my message is to get it out there. That's why I wrote the book, as many ways, as in many formats as I can get out there, podcasts, speaking to groups, the book, the more the better. So I spoke at a women's expo this past weekend. I actually am going to a spa where I'm going for the weekend, and I'm giving 2 presentations, one each night. I think that the message is universal and can be melded or maybe specialized to whatever group I'm speaking to. Corporations, there's no reason, school districts, to talk to their teachers about just the mindset shift, how we approach life, how we approach our jobs, and to just give people some food for thought and some tools that they can use.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who would benefit from discussions about how to find positivity.
Yes, for sure. Especially at the workplace, I think, because in the workplace, I think, how quick are we to complain about a person, about a new policy that comes up within the company? There seems to always be something. And instead of focusing on that, let's focus on what we can control.
Yeah. So now this is the point of the show where we like to do 5 quick questions that never turn out to be quick, but we still keep doing it anyway, just because I like it.
Okay.
Question 1. What is your favorite holiday tradition? And this can be for any holiday.
Oh my goodness. That is really hard. Okay, so I'm Jewish. However, I love Christmas so much that it's ridiculous. And since I was a little girl, I have always, most of my friends are actually not Jewish. So as a little girl, I always spent Christmas at one of my friends' homes. But back in 1983 or 3, I think, I started spending Christmas with a college friend's family. And I have spent every Christmas with them, other than 2. 1, because my grandmother was ill, and 2, because I was about to give birth. And her family's home is 2.5 hours from where I live. So didn't want to take that trip. I actually gave birth on December 31st. So
oh, wow.
Those were the only 2 times. So however many years that is, I can't even calculate. 30 plus years I've been spending Christmas with that family who I love, and they're my family who's not related by blood.
That's great. I love that answer. So now question 2, what is the first fiction book you read that you really connected with?
Oh boy, that's hard. You know what? And maybe it's just because the movie was just out. I love Judy Blume. Oh my goodness. I could not wait growing up to get my hands on that. When I think back to what I read as a little girl, because I was a voracious reader as a little girl, the things that come to mind are Judy Blume. And I used to love Nancy Drew mysteries. And I don't like mysteries. But there was something back then that I loved those Nancy Drew mysteries.
See, and I actually like the Hardy Boys more than I like Nancy Drew. I don't know
Oh,
why.
that's interesting.
Yeah, I'm just weird.
No, you're not weird.
So number 3, if you hadn't been able to write about your experiences, how do you think you would have gotten your message out?
Well, I think the other ways, like I'm talking, like I mentioned, podcasts are a great way because, you just never know who's listening and you never know, you might be listening now, but somebody might be listening a year from now,
True.
which is great that they're evergreen.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the speaking. And I'm trying on social media to get it out there. As you mentioned, I make some videos often, although I'm kind of taking a break right now because I just did a thing where I made a video every day for 60 days. And that was a lot.
Oh, yeah. I just saw that on TikTok.
Yeah. So I just turned 60. My birthday was October 9th. My book launch date was August 9th.
Oh, wow.
So 60 days before I turned 60. That's where I got the idea. That was one of the reasons I actually picked that launch date. There was a couple of others, but that was one of the reasons. So I decided that I would do a video series, 60 things that I learned in the 60 years.
That is
so I did
cool.
a video every day. Yeah. So I'm taking a rest there. I have nothing else to share.
So now question 4, this kind of piggybacks on some of what you just said. It's like, why do you think podcasts are so beneficial to the world right now?
Oh my goodness. I mean, it's because of a podcast, 2 podcasts, probably more than that, but 2 that, I can think of that have literally changed my life. It is so amazing that you could sit in your car or be taking a walk or wherever you listen to podcasts and learn about so many things, be introduced to so many different people and concepts. And then you can, like I did, connect with those people in quote unquote real life and develop a relationship and see how they can help you. I mean, like I said, it was me listening to my gut. The first one that I listened to, and I know now it's supposed to be a short question, but like you said, it's going to get long. So here we go. The first one I listened to when I started listening to podcasts, I had one friend, my friend I spent Christmas with, who was listening to podcasts. And I'm like, what are they? I said to her, I don't understand. Who are you listening to? Strangers? Like, who are these people? And she said, well, you just go on and search for whatever topic. And I thought, well, I don't know what I want to hear. So I searched for weight loss because that's always on my mind. And I started listening to one and then I added another and, decided I don't like this person so much. And on one of the podcasts, I heard someone being interviewed and she was a mindset coach. And then I started listening to her podcast and that eventually led to me taking her course. And that shot me down that rabbit hole, but in a good way.
Yeah.
That really changed my life. And it all started from listening to a podcast.
That's incredible. That's one of those things that always gives me hope. Because I know for me, my podcast, I have connected with so many people that I never would have met, like you.
Yep, exactly. I love that too.
It hadn't been for this podcast, I never would have talked to all of these authors. And I usually pick up such great tips from all of these authors that I talk to that they have increased my engagement with my audience. They have helped me increase my sales. And some of them have become friends. We still text back and forth all the time. And it's just...
Which is so great.
Oh, yeah. I love it. It's one of the best things I've ever done.
Agreed.
So, question 5. With your business all being about positivity, do you ever find yourself just getting crabby and having a hard time getting out of it?
Oh my gosh, of course. I mean, I'm human, right?
So now what do you do when you actually fall into that place?
I don't stay there as long as I used to. I really try and refocus my thoughts. Or maybe it's time to take a time out. right?
Hmm.
Maybe I'm just overwhelmed. It's time to step away from the computer,
Hmm.
get outside, call a friend, just to try and get myself out of that deep dark hole. I think really the difference is now is that awareness. And it doesn't happen right away. Sometimes I'm in it and I'm having myself a lovely pity party.
Hmm.
And I am able to say, hold up. I think I had a day a couple of months ago that was probably the worst I had. By the end of the day, I was crying. Somebody hacked me. I fell for a whole hacker scheme, and
Oh,
it
wow.
it wound up taking like the whole day away from me. And I was supposed to have an appointment with someone, and I was like, I'm on with the tech guy. I'll just be an hour, and then it was 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it was. And by the end, I was crying. My son came down and said, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I just had the worst day." And and then I'm a Jets fan, and it was our opening day, and Aaron Rodgers got hurt in the first four
Oh,
plays, and I said, I think it's time for me to go to bed, and I
yeah.
did. And the next day, I felt better.
Yeah. My husband was telling me about the Jets thing.
Yeah, it was like, seriously, that's what's happening now. I finally was like so excited to sit down and watch this game after the
Hmm.
crying and everything. My husband was a huge Jets fan, and it really became part of my whole family's life. We were every Sunday or every game day, we all would dress up in our jerseys,
Yeah.
and it was one of my favorite times, really, and memories with my husband were those Sundays where my husband was the one who cooked and food shopped. So, we had our special little things that he would make and our
Hmm.
little traditions.
Yeah.
And so it's hard. Watching the Jets now is hard, but I was excited that night. And then that happened to top off a bad day. But
Yeah.
there's always tomorrow.
Now, I have been asking bonus questions on this
Oh,
because with the holidays
okay.
coming up, there's so many gift giving holidays coming up in the next few months. What is your best suggestion for somebody to buy for a writer and for a reader in their life?
Oh, that is a hard bonus question. Writer and a reader. So, one of the things, even though I type on the computer, somebody gave me a really nice pen, which I love because I use it for my journaling. But I don't want to say I'm a knickknack person. I don't have a bunch of knickknacks all over, but some of my passions, I like to have little reminders. And so someone gave me a little knickknack shaped as like an old classic typewriter.
Oh,
And I
nice.
love I love that. I love looking at that. It reminds me, wow, I really am an author.
Hmm.
As a reader, for me, I read on Kindle, I read on Audible, and I read physical books.
Yeah.
So to me, it would be a boring gift certificate, but it would be something that I would love.
That's one thing. It's like I'm always telling people, it's like if you don't know what to buy me, just give me a gift certificate to a bookstore. You're good. I'm happy.
Yep.
That always goes over.
It's so true. You know what? A few weeks ago, I did an author signing at a Barnes and Noble,
Hmm.
and I'm sitting in there thinking, I wish they had some event where you could just come here and sleep over, and
Yeah.
they locked you in, and I could just like spend the whole entire night just walking around, picking up different books. It's funny, right? I think those of us who love books, just the touch, the smell, I
Hmm.
mean, I don't know what it is, but it's a wonderful feeling. So I think I'm going to contact Barnes and Noble and suggest that they start having slumber parties there.
Well, as somebody who worked at Barnes and Noble for 13 and a half
Oh,
years,
okay then.
I can tell you the nights that we had physical inventory and it was just all of us locked in the building for a while,
Yeah,
it was fun.
I bet.
Yeah, I think those would go over very well. Have pajama parties.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so that's wonderful that you got to work there. Obviously, you were there for a long time, so you enjoyed it and it was a good experience.
Oh, it was one of those things where I did it while I was going to college. Then I did it still on the weekends while I was working my job after college. And
Yep.
I love books. So I
E-
didn't want to go away from them. I still wanted to do that.
exactly. Exactly. That's great.
So, what is next for you? You have done so much. What could you possibly add to your plate?
I am launching a group coaching program. Information is going to come out around the middle of November, and it's going to kick off on January 8th. I'm very, very excited because my friends call me a groupaholic. I don't think that's really a word, but they made it up. And when they first said it, I was like, well, what are you talking about? They said, a little condescendingly, joking, you're such a joiner. And I said, you know what? When I started thinking about it, I am, because being around other people who have similar goals fuels me and
Hmm.
feeds me and helps me. I like to be there to help other people, and I love other people to be there and help me. And I can think of so many different times that I have been part of a support group that has helped me for whatever reason, specializing in, I've been in a mental illness, support group for family members of people who had mental illness. I've been in an autism support group. I've gone to weight loss support groups. Like, you name it, I have done it. And I don't understand someone who doesn't want to speak to other people who are trying to get through the same thing or trying to learn the same thing.
Hmm.
And one day it kind of like hit me in the face, like, what am I doing? I've been a part of so many online groups for entrepreneurs. I love my writing group. I can't wait for Fridays at 1 o'clock. As a matter of fact, I just realized I double booked myself, and I went to the person and said, is there any chance we can move it? Because I couldn't bear the idea of missing my group.
Yeah,
So if I'm a groupaholic, why aren't I creating that space for the people I want to help? And so I am. So
that's
that's my
great.
next thing.
Now, do you have a newsletter where people can sign up and follow you and be alerted every time you add something like this?
The best way, I do send out a weekly email just talking about the podcast that had just dropped. Right now, that's all I've got because I can't handle writing anymore right now. But I do on my website, which is Debbie, Debbie, the letter R, Weiss, Weiss.com. I have, like you mentioned, I have the Morning Sprinkle of Goodness download. I have a download about self-care. I have a free book preview download. And I have a download about unlocking your power. Any of those things will automatically put you on the email list if you choose to download any of them. And if not, that's fine. If you still want to be on the email list, there's a contact form. Just shoot me an email and I'll add you.
And you also have a fabulous store on your website.
Oh, thank you so much for mentioning that. One of the things after my transformation, actually, it was just a year ago. It was the week before Thanksgiving, and I was in bed scrolling, shopping for something actually. And in the search bar, I put hearts, which I'd done a million times. But for some reason, that night, it flashed before my eyes the fact that when I was in college, there was a store that only sold items with hearts. And I've always loved hearts from the time I was a little girl. And I used to tell my friends, someday I'm going to own a heart store. I'm going to own a heart store. And of course, life took me in a different direction. No heart store. But that night, I realized, hey, it's 2022. You don't need to have a brick and mortar store. I can
Hmm.
do it online. And so A Sprinkle of Hearts was born, and it also actually launched on that January 14th of 2023, the same day, 2 weeks after my husband passed away, that I had to have my book back to the editor. So
Oh,
I
wow.
was very busy
Yeah.
after the funeral. Yeah, it kind of hit after all. It hit more after January 15th.
Well, I can tell you, I was looking through your items on there today, and I love the abstract hearts design that you have.
Thank
Because you
you.
have that on tote, and you've got it on shoes, and you've
Yep.
got it on phone covers. I mean, I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, I say to people, I think I created the store just for me. You should see how much stuff I have. And I keep trying to get, different designs and different things. And I have to say the quality is really good.
And you have a
It's good
great
stuff.
selection of items too. I mean, you have things for kids, you have things for adults, you have housewares. I mean, there's a really nice selection. It's not just, a few t-shirts and sweatshirts and you're done. There's a
No,
full shop there. It's very nice and well
thank you so
done.
much. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Where can people find you one more time?
DebbieRWeiss.com is the best place because all my social media links are on there. I am on Instagram and TikTok the most. I went viral on TikTok after my husband died. And on Instagram, it's debbie.r.weiss. And it is Debbie Weiss, I believe, on TikTok. I got to check that.
And we will have links for all of your information in the description of the podcast so people can just click and go and find you very easily.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Now, is there anything that our listeners need to know about you that we have not covered today?
Boy, you already learned a lot. My one last thing is that in the beginning of my book, I talk about the fact that when I was younger, it seemed like when it was time to be in a yearbook, whether it was I had an elementary school yearbook and a junior high school and high school, they always asked you what your favorite quote is. Mm-hmm. And I never had a favorite quote. And I couldn't understand how kids at 12 and 15 years old had a favorite quote.
Yeah, that seems a little weird.
Yeah, I thought so. I don't even know how I decide. I must have picked something. Somebody else said this. So, okay, I'll do that one too. And a few years ago, I was working on something and this phrase came into my head. And I thought to myself, did I just make that up? Because that sounds really good. And I Googled and I did not make it up. It came from Glinda the Good Witch, who said, "You've always had the power, my dear. You just had to learn it for yourself." And how many times in my life had I heard that quote and I only took it for face value? Dorothy, all you had to do was say there's no place like home and click your heels 3 times. Mm-hmm. But that day, I realized that it is such a deeper meaning to that quote. And it really resonated with me because it was like she was talking to me and to the rest of us. I've always, and each of us, we have the power within us. It's just realizing that we have it.
That's amazing. And that is a perfect thought to leave people with.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful.
So there you have it, my interview with the incredible Debbie Weiss. Please be sure to go to her social media and check out her website and her store. If you like hearts or you just like things that are cheerful and pretty, go check it out. She has got some fantastic designs. We're going to have a link for her shop and her book and everything else in the year-end book buying guide for Book Banter with Dianne Burkhart. If you haven't heard about this yet, we do have a new companion magazine, which we started in October. It is Book Banter Magazine, and we feature several authors who have been on the podcast with me, but we also have a few authors who have never been on the podcast. So we're bringing you authors from all over the place. We have had a cookbook author in each issue that we have published so far, and we hope to have more in the future. And the great thing about having cookbook authors is they share a recipe in the magazine as well. And I love that. I've been trying out the recipes. So far, we're doing very good. Our cookbook author for our November issue is Michelle DiPietro, and her cookbook, Soupified, Soups Inspired by Your Favorite Dishes. It has 31 innovative recipes that ditch the dish and embrace the bowl. And I have to tell you, this has quickly become my favorite cookbook. Oh my God. I mean, I cannot gush on her enough. We have tried her lasagna soup, her twice baked loaded potato soup with bacon, which is in the November issue today that you can get for free. Just saying. I love potato soup, but that quickly became my favorite way to have potato soup. It is so good. Last night and today for lunch, we had her shrimp scampi soup, and tonight for dinner, we're going to be having her baba ganoush soup. And later this week, we're going to be having her crab cake soup. I mean, seriously, my husband and I sat down and looked through her cookbook. There is not a single recipe we have found that we do not want to try. We are probably going to end up going through every recipe in this cookbook, and I have never done that with any cookbook I have ever owned, and I have owned a lot because I love to cook. I've been cooking since I was 7 years old. Seriously. I checked out a Better Homes and Gardens cookbook for kids in first grade and baked my first cake when I was 7 years old. So I have been cooking a very long time. Love cookbooks. This one you need. If you like having soup, you have to have this cookbook, hands down. In the November issue, we also have author swag. If you like cuddling up in nice warm hoodies and sweatshirts, having a hot cup of tea while you cuddle in with your favorite cozy mystery, this is the magazine issue for you because it's filled with all of those things. We've got cozy mystery authors. We've got women's fiction authors. We've got children's books, young readers. We've got nonfiction stuff. We've got everything you could possibly want for those chilly fall nights that you just want to settle in and have a good book, a warm snuggly hoodie, a hot cup of tea, and a great bowl of soup for dinner. It's the perfect fall companion. So go to burkhartbooks.com and check out the latest issue of our Book Banter magazine. I am currently working on our December issue with a fabulous feature author, J.B. Kaufman. I have known this guy for more than 20 years now. He is incredible. First of all, he's the nicest guy you could ever meet. Second, he is a world-renowned movie historian. And not only does he know so much about movies in general, he specializes in writing books about the history of Disney movies. And I have learned so much about the things that actually went on behind the scenes about the creation of some of the great classic Disney movies that you would never even imagine. Could you imagine that cartoons could have helped the United States win World War II? It's true. And you can read all about it in his books, and you'll find out more about that in the December issue of Book Banter magazine. Now, don't forget, we also have the year-end buying guide coming up, which is going to have book links for every author that we have spoken to since season 1. That's going to be children's books, adult books, we have romance, we have nonfiction, we have cookbooks. Everybody that we have talked to, you'll be able to find them in this magazine and go and buy their books. It'll be a perfect holiday companion if you're trying to shop for friends or family, or even if you're looking for new authors for yourself. Well, that's enough blathering for one day. Let's go ahead and close out this episode. And don't forget to check back next week and every Wednesday after, because we have got more fantastic authors coming up. And I can't wait to share them with you. But for now, it's that time for you folks to go forth and be really happy.